Hello and good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're joining us from. It is 3 p.m. here in the UK and 10 a.m. Eastern Time, and you're all most welcome to join us here at 0 Days Live. Now, of course, today is Wednesday, which means we are exploring our Security Begins Here theme. In a few moments, we'll be joined by our very special guest today, James Stickland, CEO of authentication specialist Veridium, to discuss the subject of digital transformation. But before that, a quick shout out to one of our regulars of the show, Jim. I'm reliably informed that you're celebrating a special day today. So many happy returns, and we're very pleased that you're choosing to spend it with us here at 0 Days Live today. Welcome back, of course, to everybody else that's joining us to our virtual studios, where yesterday we spoke to Fran Howarth of Blue Research, where she discussed her recent report on managed detection and response, and how many organizations are placing detection and response capabilities towards the top of their agenda due to the cybersecurity skill shortages that we're seeing right now, and how there is a really strong synergy between managed detection and response, endpoint detection and response, and network detection and response, as these are all critical vectors of any organization. We still have a lot more to come on this week too. Tomorrow, we'll be welcoming to the studio John Noble, Non-Executive Director of NHS Digital, speaking about digitally supporting the health service, which, as everyone will be aware, regardless of the industry type, is clearly of critical importance. Taking us into the weekend on Friday, we have industry commentator Clive Room of Pulse Conferences, where Dress Down Friday becomes 80s Day, and all of us here at 0 Days Live will be embracing the dress code, so please do join us. And as usual, I'm in the chair to meet and greet our guest today. My name's Stuart Reed, and I'm with Nominet, focused on cyber solutions. Nominet is primarily known for being responsible for managing the .uk domain, which we've been doing for over 23 years now, with something in the order of 15 million domains currently under management. Building on this strong heritage of understanding the importance of domain names for network connectivity, we also provide cybersecurity solutions to protect both government and enterprise networks worldwide from cyber attacks, including providing service to the UK government's National Cybersecurity Centre. Ensuring people are able to be connected, included and secure is at the heart of what we do at Nominet, and that is now more important than ever. And with that in mind, we wanted to bring you an interactive show to bridge the gap left behind by the lack of physical meetings that are taking place, and bring you 0 Days Live. So this is a show for everyone that has an interest in or is from the cybersecurity community. Of course, though, it is not possible without you, so thank you very much for joining us and getting involved. And if during today's show or any of the live shows that you join, you do want to ask a question or provide a comment, please do use the console on your screen and we'll read them out during the webcast. As a quick reminder, for each of our 30-minute or so shows, we are absolutely live each and every day, which means we are broadcasting out the 0 Days Live, which means that there is bound to be some mild blips along the way. And as those of you that tuned in yesterday will have noted, they do happen sometimes. So we hope that when they do, it just gives you something extra to smile about during the day. But we're not just live, of course, we are here at your convenience on demand too. As always, each and every show can be found at nominetcyber.com/0 Days Live, which is the same page you signed up from. So it really couldn't be easier. And we're delighted to welcome both new audience members and our regulars to the show every day as we build an accessible community to bring people together, hear from others in the industry, get a roundup of what's going on in the news, share some thoughts on best practice, and of course, interject some good humor along the way. With that in mind, we cover a lot of important subjects, but we don't take ourselves too seriously. And speaking of not taking ourselves too seriously, I'd normally at this stage pass over to Steve, but he has a get out of jail free card today. He is in the midst of giving a webinar to users of the service we provide to UK government. So he is cordially excused for today's show, but don't worry, he will be back with us tomorrow. So instead, I will jump straight across and say hello to Kerry. Hi there, Kerry.
Hi, Stuart. Good to see that you've sacked Steve since his technical difficulties yesterday.
Well, I wasn't going to draw any reference to that on today's show for the kind of purposes of protecting the guilty, but you're absolutely right. Steve Steve did get a serious reprimand for not being on time or having his finger on the mouse ready, which is surprising given that he's got a new mouse mat. But there we go. We'll talk to him more about that tomorrow. With every episode this week, we've been asking what is the best purchase that you've made since being at home. Yesterday, mine, you might remember, was exercise related. Today, it's food related. It's my new toasty maker, and I have to say, I love it. Remind us, Kerry, what's yours?
Before I share with you what mine is, I think lockdown is starting to get to me a little bit. So I was watching Tiger King last night with a glass of wine, as you do. Instead of being outraged by the number of cats that are in captivity in the US, how I normally would feel when watching the show, I found myself Googling cat sanctuaries, looking to get myself a cat, not a tiger, a cat, obviously. I don't think I'm going to break. I think I'll stay pet free. But if I turn up on the show on Friday covered with pets, that will obviously be my purchase. But today it is the selfie stick. This has been an absolute lifesaver in this lockdown when having to talk to friends on the phone. Not only is it a selfie stick, it also doubles up into a tripod as well. So that's my little tip. Get yourself one of these.
Very handy. Thank you for that, Kerry. I feel that we've got yet again another deep insight into your life. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. And of course, we do want you at home to share with us your insights as well. So we would like to know what your best purchase since being at home is. So please do let us know. Kerry, as always, is eagle-eyed and looking out for those. So do let us know, and she'll be able to read them out during today's show. Now, as I mentioned a few moments ago, today we are lucky enough to be joined by James Stickland, CEO of Veridium. But before we meet him, here is a quick peek at a video we conducted with him a few weeks ago. So take a look at this.
We need to be able to provide applications that are, developed, at the heart of what we're trying to achieve with our interface with our customers. Everything is about speed, and it's about delivery, and it's about making sure that you don't leave security behind as you run as fast as we all are. We'll start to see people asking the question, demanding the answers to storage and information as we see more breaches, which there will be more.
My technical difficulties today, so I'm not going to be able to talk to Steve about that after all tomorrow. But what I was saying to myself, because I was on mute, was welcome to the show, James. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. Sorry, I'll reappear for the second time. Sorry, my apologies.
No problem at all. So as I say, great to have you here. Good to get an insight as well from the video that we conducted with you a few weeks ago. And before we get into the main conversation today around digital transformation, kind of the fun starter question, I guess. The question we've been asking everyone this week is, what is the best purchase you've made since working from home? So what's yours, James?
Well, I would have said it was hair clippers up until yesterday, which arrived late last night. But unfortunately, I've been kind of scalped. So I'm not sure that was the best purchase. I don't think my wife likes me as much as I thought, having seen this morning. But I think it's definitely a trampoline, something I would never have bought before in all my days, and was probably a doomsayer on trampolines. But it's somewhere that we can get, energy released from children in the garden.
Excellent, a good choice. And actually, I think you don't need to worry too much about the hair. I think it's a common a common fashion statement that everyone's going to be having, if not already, before too long. Steve, who hasn't been able to join us today, has done his lockdown haircut, and that's certainly something to behold. So if you're able to join us tomorrow when he joins us again, then it's a sight worth seeing. So again,
and haircuts, amazing man.
Yeah, indeed. So thank you again for joining us today. First of all, give us a bit of an overview of what Veridium does and how security is approached from your perspective.
Yeah, so Veridium is a biometric authentication company. So, to the point that you've been talking about earlier in terms of the digitalization that we're all going through at the moment, what Veridium offers is a variety of different software to provide biometric authentication for login experiences for employees, but also for customers, and also transition that gap where you have to understand the identity of the initial user. So, identification. So how do you identify a user and have them consistently authenticated using biometrics?
Okay, great. And in terms of, clearly the current situation we're all facing means that in some respects, in some industries and some organizations, digital transformation has kind of occurred more rapidly than perhaps it might do at any other time. Do you think that the rapid adoption of digital transformation can be at odds with the kind of cybersecurity side of things?
Yeah, I think it can. I think security's always been used as an excuse. Not to kind of drive the digitalization agenda maybe as fast as we'd all wanted it pre-COVID. I actually now think that security is the enabler in this digitalization experience during COVID. We've seen a huge increase in our engagement with customers because they need to understand the identity of the employee or the user that they're working with. Regulation doesn't go away. Even in these kind of troubling times, and whilst it may be paused, obviously hackers and nation state funded attacks, etc., those still continue abound. So I think that moving the digital journey and ensuring that security can lead that out is an incredible opportunity at the moment.
Yeah, and as you say, there is a current rapid pace of change taking place right now, and it's easy for security potentially in the past to be seen as a way of getting in the way of some of those things. But we're kind of in a situation where organizations are having to move at a pace to adopt these type of more digital initiatives. I guess. Well, is there a risk that whilst some organizations are coming to you to talk about how they secure some of their assets, is there a risk more broadly that organizations are potentially leaving security behind, or security becomes much later afterthought?
I mean, there is a concern of that. Obviously, we're dealing with Fortune 1000, Fortune 100 size companies, so they tend to have a more long-term approach to the security strategy and posture. But yeah, absolutely, some corners are being cut in terms of the speed of execution. People are obviously and customers are being affected, and their revenue lines are being affected. We also enabled 100% work from home policy in the last 20-30 days. And if your institution or your enterprise was geared up for maybe 10 or 15%, you've ratcheted that up at such a breakneck speed that obviously a lot of let's say policy and process that would normally have been in place has been kind of broken down to enable that. Now, that's not a bad thing in isolation, but equally, if it's not readdressed, you can leave gaping holes in your environment to really leave back doors open for future issues that obviously will come back to bite.
Yeah, and this kind of is a very similar theme to what we've heard from other guests that have been on the show, talking about all sorts of areas of cybersecurity and how the rapid adoption of some of the technology assets to support the mass working from home policy that has been thrust upon everyone has meant that potentially some gaps are being left there, and some vulnerabilities are being seen as well. So what you're saying there kind of supports that kind of the rapid pace of trying to make sure that everything from a business continuity perspective is in place is there, but sometimes that means that there are things that maybe even inadvertently overlooked as part of the security stack. So, I mean, what do you feel is the best way to ensure that security is considered at the start and throughout every project that's taken forward? And I mean, we're in unique circumstances perhaps right now, but even, you know, kind of pause for thought. Is it about communication? Is it about process? Is it about policy? What is it that organizations should really be thinking about to make sure that security is front and center?
Well, look, if we all had the benefit of hindsight, which is always 2020, we'd have been building our processes, our applications, our user experiences with security by design. And so I've seen great examples of companies that have done that. A number of tier 1 banks that are now just able to switch on the taps, and gear up 100% of remote working in hours, not even days. And enabling data kind of persistent access, so that they can ensure that they consistently meet the regulation in terms of access and control. So there are great shining examples. What I think that most companies that have struggled and that are kind of firefighting or paddling at this point is to kind of readdress the security policy by design. How are you building your applications with the security silver thread through it in terms of identity at the front, through to ongoing firewall management and ongoing data security throughout that whole kind of journey. Data, as we know, is the lifeblood of all these companies. Yes, cash is clearly the key thing that's keeping businesses afloat at this point, and a key kind of milestone. But post-COVID, it's all about client data, and it's all about the ability to secure that in such a sensitive fashion, and that we don't end up with macro collapses of companies because they get breached post this event.
Yeah, and for regulars of this show, this is usually the time that Steve pops up on screen raising his virtual hand. Now, of course, Steve is not here today, but it seems hot on his heels is Kerry with her virtual hand. So that can only mean one thing. You've got some questions, Kerry.
Yeah, I'm taking liberties in Steve's absence, but yeah, I was very interested, James, when you were talking about the gaps, potential gaps left through the rapid adoption of remote working. What are the biggest threats do you think that organizations could be facing by not plugging these gaps in the traditional methods?
So identity, and obviously insert, plug, unplug. But if I take myself out of Veridium for one point, having been in banking, in tech strategy and investing, a huge problem is still the identity of the end user. So we've most institutions have been using a tokenized approach, or a VPN-based approach, which can work fabulously well. But now we've enabled these, the 100% utilization of our remote working policies. We don't always know, and this is a statement of always rather than all the time, who the end user is. So if I've got no ability to understand if it's Stephanie Stewart logging into the environment, or if it's Kerry that's accessing the content, or it's Stuart's wife and children, or significant other and partner, or your new cat, whatever it might be that's accessing that kind of ecosystem, you put yourself at risk. You put your client data at risk. You put yourself at regulatory risk. Those are the sorts of backdoors that are basically being created at this point by not understanding the utilization. We saw password reset kind of attacks going up, and phishing attacks going up by like 700% in like the first 2 weeks of COVID, like specifically targeting, please reset your password, because you're now working remote, et cetera, Like there's so much kind of backdoor creation in this kind of identity journey. So for me, understanding fundamentally the identity of the individual allows you to set policy, allows you to set access, allows you to set control measures, allows you to do all of those things. Now, obviously we need to protect all the other elements of our data environments, our DMZs, etc. But I genuinely believe that identity is at the very kind of center of all these things.
And do you believe that security teams, will they need to get more granular in the levels of assurances that they're asking from particular vendors and perhaps partners? Yeah,
I mean, it's a really valid point, and I think that again, working at large tier 1 banks, the process in which you verify your supply chain, again, demonstrates how you can manage the weakest link scenario. So fabulous that your environment is totally secure, but if your weakest point is a partner, vendor, supplier that you're working with, at the end of your food chain, we've seen hacks in institutions where people were getting in based on charitable events. So like, we gave access to our environment, a specific bank that allowed, a charitable cause to be able to get in, and that was then the weakest point in which people were able to enter the enterprise bank's environment. So yeah, I think putting pressure on the policy management, understanding the utilization and the strategy around their supply chain. So the T1 and the T2 type connectivity that you'll be looking for.
Mm-hmm. And do you have any tips around sort of the questions that security teams should be asking? I guess in terms like for external stakeholders, but also internally. Say if the IT team wants to introduce a new software, kind of thing.
A really good question. So I mean, clearly you can go through the standard, expectation of, supply chain rule management, but I would be asking questions about where people are hosting their own infrastructure. I mean, SaaS is being mass deployed, at scale, which is fabulous. Don't get me wrong. I'm a big proponent of cloud-based, kind of technology. But equally, if your new supplier is hosting your content and therefore your access, therefore your connectivity in a cloud environment that you're either not comfortable with, or you don't understand the location of, or you don't understand the policy around it, that's a massive hole. So again, harping back to my banking days, but we spent a lot of time working with our cloud providers to mirror our security environments, and that was one of the forced kind of events. So great that we're going to go and use insert cloud provider, but they would have to mirror our own security posture and policy, so that we could then ensure that if we faced off to a regulator or we faced off just to ourselves, that we knew we'd done the best possible kind of delivery of what that architecture would look like.
That's really interesting, isn't it? Holding up in the mirror against how you would do it in your own ways as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So last one from me then. I was on a webinar this morning with some of our customers, and we were talking about what are the biggest threats that people are facing at the moment, and ransomware came up by far the biggest threat that people are concerned about. What do you think the impact ransomware can have? Would it get in the way of digital transformation?
No, look, I think that there's always something that can get in the way, and I actually, and maybe I'm a half glass full, although it didn't sound like it from that video. I sound like I was saying that the end of the world was going to happen from hacks. But if we let things get in the way of the digital journey and digital transformation opportunity, then kind of woe betide us. Ransomware absolutely is a problem. It's something we need to isolate, something we need to reduce, but there will always be another problem. This is genuinely a sort of opportunity, as much as this is clearly a wildly challenging, wildly unneeded kind of global event. This really gives us a huge opportunity to use digital transformation at its best, and have security and technology working hand in hand. So I think ransomware could be a problem if we let it be a problem. Reality is we've got to be strong enough in our belief that digital transformation is the way that we're going to interface with our users, and be they employees or clients going forward. So we have to use this as an accelerant.
Great, thank you.
And it's interesting, actually, James, we've touched on ransomware a lot in this show, and I'm sure it won't be the last time either, but it seems that there's still opportunities that cyber criminals are taking to try and hold, quite literally, at ransom the data that people have, which I guess reinforces the need to make sure that you've got the right level of access and the right level of users having those access rights in the first place.
Yeah, and access and control is a big part of a zero trust network. Being able to understand who you're dealing with, because at the end of the day, if you can actually have an irrefutable identity of everybody that you're interacting with, then you can start to remove these password-based or phishing-based attacks that create ransomware, etc. So this all emanates from the ability to be able to understand the identity. We know we're all going to get breached, and that hopefully wasn't my doomsayer statement. you know, the reality to that piece is how quickly we respond and the reactions that we put in place to it. So, you know, having response-based policies that control and allow us to respond as institutions is key, you know, and that plus understanding the identity credentials and working with who is the endpoint, who's the user, because that's what it kind of comes down to, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much for joining us, James. It's been a really fascinating conversation today, and just shows yet again another layer of that cybersecurity stack that really needs to be taken into account, probably more so now than ever before. So thank you very much for joining us. We're almost out of time for today's show, but what I wanted to do was turn back to Kerry for a bit of a wash up of today's news.
Great, thank you. So Info Security Magazine reports that ransomware attacks on the US government have actually dropped to a level not seen in years. In 2019, there were 966 ransomware attacks over the year, compared to the first quarter of 2020, and there was only 89 ransomware attacks. There's a privacy battle taking place between the French government and Apple over their contact tracking app. You can read more about that on the BBC. And then finally, in Security Boulevard, there's an article on access control highlighting that overprivileged users are still a major cybersecurity challenge.
Great. Well, thank you, Kerry. And, you know, couldn't have teed that up better. Again, the theme of the show coming back to ransomware again. It seems to be one that comes back and around again. So there's a real mix in today's news, but it is interesting to see how some of those threats do seem to be changing again. And arguably, while we're seeing perhaps less ransomware attacks right now, perhaps, or at least for government agencies, perhaps the attackers are just shifting. We've heard a lot from the news roundups that we've done on this show, and also from our guests, that there's a lot of COVID-related phishing attacks coming on right now. So maybe they're just swapping out their tactics rather than just moving completely away from ransomware. So maybe we'll look at that as a growing vector again. So it's again underlines the importance maybe of making sure that we're remaining vigilant from all of those kinds of potential attacks. Also, the access control story is quite an interesting one as well. We focus a lot around the breaches of attacks, but of course that is only half the picture. It's clearly fundamental that we manage the access rights of those users to ensure they're not opening up sensitive data unnecessarily or inadvertently. So thanks for that. Also, thank you very much for today's special guest, James Stickland from Veridium. To everyone here, front of house, Kerry, and behind the scenes at ZeroDaysLive here as well. Of course, to all of you for tuning in. Don't forget, tomorrow we're going to be joined by a very special guest, John Noble, Non-Executive Director of NHS Digital, talking about digitally securing the health service. So please do join us for that. And also we will have Steve back tomorrow as well. But given my slight technical issue earlier on from the audio, make sure you don't tell him. So that can be our little secret. Please do join us again tomorrow. Until then, thank you very much and goodbye.